Hello, everyone. It is Eureka, your host of the Happy Child series. Today, it's my honor to have Erin with us. Erin is an internationally known lecturer on architectural imagery, body language, and martial arts, as well as the founder and president of Fire Mountain Programs. And since 2004, he's run camps, teen camps, and family programs. In 2009, he and his wife, Christine, opened a residential mental health and dependency recovery treatment center for teens from 12 to 17 in Estates Park, Colorado. Fire Mountain Residential Treatment Center was recently named one of the top 50 healthcare providers in the U.S. He facilitates the powerful parenting event, Parenting Teens That Struggle, and is the host of Colorado's #1 parenting podcast, Beyond Risk and Back, as you can see on his shirt, which is a mental health news radio network, third highest rated show internationally. Wow. He's also a parent coach for parents of kids that are at risk, and a teen addiction interventionist, and a happy husband and father of 2 young adults. So welcome today, Erin. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your summit.
Awesome. So I'm just so curious. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your program? How did you get into this work?
Well, I think like so many people, this work for me ended up being the 12th step. In my own recovery process, there's a point you hit where you realize that your job, your mission is to bring the message of hope to addicts and families of addicts that are still struggling. And that rolled into me literally on Friday and Saturday nights going around Boulder, Colorado, based on how many phone calls I got, picking up teenagers and going to meetings with them, just getting them introduced. I didn't care if they were high, I didn't care if they were committed. We just cared that for that hour, they weren't out on the streets getting high. And my wife and I running kids camps and teen rites of passage programs, we really started to get just calls from parents saying, I need more. There's, my kid is still struggling. Things are not getting better. They're getting worse. And we recognized as people providing services to parents to help that there was a difference between motivation and therapy. And so we created a therapeutic program, and it just kept evolving. It started out as this sober home model that we had seen work with adults, and more just became this residential program. I have 30 staff. We have doctors and nurses and master's level therapists, and we're now an accredited school, middle school and high school. And the program is extremely successful. We're a 4-month minimum program. So these kids come and live at our facility. And I mean, we're talking 11 to 13 hours of therapy a week, not including the parents program. And that's a big part of why I love doing these parenting summits, is because so much gets focused on what the kid needs to do different or what a parent can do to help the kid. And in truth, what my job has become over the years, in 20 years of working with teens, with children, now my job is primarily supporting and working with parents to say, you want your kid to change, I get it. Here are the changes you need to make so that their changes have a place to grow. And that means you have to change the soil. You want the fruits to be differently, the parents are the roots. And we've got to change the roots. That's where we'll get different fruit. So that's what's happened from my own process of recovery, from having children of my own, from having my own struggles, from having my own children who struggle, is that here we are now in 2020, and we're still running strong. We still work with hundreds of families every year. We still run programming and parenting workshops and giving as much. My job now is to give as much information to parents that people in the mental health and recovery industry have. I want to bring the experts directly to the parents and just cut out the middleman of, I have this info and you've got to pay me to get it. I have this info and you need this info. Here it is. And that's the goal now.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much for your powerful work with kids and parents and changing the trajectory of the kids and the families' lives. That's just so powerful and amazing work that you do. And
Appreciate it. Thank you.
so my burning question for, I think for this, what's really applicable for this audience is you work with the kids that are like at high risk already, or are already, substance abuse users or mental, or already have mental health. So I guess my question is for how do parents do, or what preventative measures do parents need to take that before their kid, gets depression? Or let's just talk about depression, because that's such a common, disorder amongst the entire population.
Yeah. It's massive. First of all, we call the kids that we work with beyond risk, right? And that's why the show is called Beyond Risk and Back. These kids were at risk 3 years ago. These kids were at risk 10 years ago. And things got missed. We call it the whisper, the shout, the slap. The children's behavior, which is the only language children actually have, is their behavior. They don't have words for what they're feeling, what they're going through, what their body cannot process. They can't put that into words, right? So they're going to put it into a behavior. The behavior speaks languages, but at first it comes out as a whisper, right? And when we don't listen to whispers, we get shouted at, right? The whispers get loud. We see the behaviors from afar. We call that the shout. If we continue to miss or ignore the shout, it becomes a slap. That's when the changes of trauma, of abandonment, of abuse, of assaults, of addiction start to create physical changes that are creating suffering, like a slap. That creates a physical change in a body, and you cannot ignore it. So we work with the kids the families who have gone beyond the slap. Depression is a tough one. It's such a potent one. As I said, that's the book I have coming out. Because for 20 years, I have watched depression rise, not just in children, as you said, but also in families. This world, this overwhelm of information. Look, the internet is anarchy. It's the truest and purest form of anarchy we've ever experienced. And no one knows, no one understands how this is affecting us, because we've just not seen the long-term effects, even of social media, which started in '96. We're still, what do we have? We don't even have 20 years worth of research of this. So we're just scratching the surface of depression. And what I know, just to touch base with depression very quickly, is it's not an attitude. It's not a bad attitude. It's not about willingness. It's not a situational experience or result. It is a cloud that looms over everything. You can have Christmas morning with your family and open up and get everything you want and be happy and have depression. You can fall in love and have depression. You can be in a band that suddenly gets signed and you make a multi-million-dollar contract and have depression. My most recent experience with depression was being in Amsterdam in this completely posh hotel, and downstairs in a conference room was a room full of people waiting to hang on my every word about how to run their business and how to be better coaches for families and et cetera. And I was there with my wife, and my children were both in college, and we had no debt, and I had depression. And I had everything I love in one hand and depression in the other. And what we try to do as parents would be like, well, all we need to do is go volunteer at the Humane Society. We need to get up and exercise. We need to take more vitamins. We need to do any one of these things. And that's correct. But that doesn't mean you're addressing the depression. Depression is a brain dysfunction, not a bad attitude. It's a brain dysfunction, not sadness because you don't have the life you want. All of those things are a result from depression. And what I really want to encourage family who is dealing with depression in their family is research the hell out of it, because you have not scratched the surface. And it's something, even at best, you could have knowledge of, you could have experience with. But unless you're actually dealing with depression yourself, you don't understand it. Mm-hmm. Understanding depression is a whole nother planet. And when I came out of my midlife crisis of suicide level depression, I literally went back to students in my facility and past graduates and apologized for missing the mark, because I felt like I had finally begun to understand what these children were living with on a daily basis. It's massive, it's huge, it's intense, and it's not situational. It's a cloud that follows you everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So for a family who is struggling, oh, let me back up. You said earlier in our conversation that if the child has depression, the family has depression. And I
Yeah.
loved that you said that, because it doesn't isolate just to the individual, and because a family is a whole unit, it affects everybody that is in the family. So I just wanted to say that and, reiterate that that is so, so true.
Well, let me
So,
say, Dr. Patch Adams was one of my first mentors, and I was invited to teach at the Gesundheit Clinic, and that never panned out. But what I learned from my very short time with Dr. Patch Adams was literally that statement: your grandmother doesn't have Alzheimer's, your family has Alzheimer's, and we treat the family. You don't have a child with depression, because if you have a child with depression, anxiety, addiction, dependency issues, self-harm issues, in the same that a child would suffer if a parent had any one of those issues, the parents, the siblings is suffering because a child is dealing with one of those issues. So the family's dealing with it. The family's being traumatized. If you have a daughter that gets sexually assaulted and then comes home and reveals it to the family is traumatized by that experience. And until the family understands how trauma plays out, what trauma actually looks like, right? Because we're always just looking at actions and results. Well, they were traumatized and then here's some results. But we're really talking about, with trauma, and the latest research is that it changes your DNA. And that DNA change can affect your future generations, up to 12 generations. Do you understand that epigenetics research is literally saying that you may be affected by something that happened to your great, 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 great grandmother? That is still trickling down, not only in your DNA, but in your family's attitude and opinions about life, the universe, and everything. And it is a fascinating research study. So to have it as close as your own child who has become suicidal or is beginning to self-harm. Why do we self-harm when we're depressed? Well, because it releases dopamine in the same way that drugs do, in the same way that exercise does, except exercise is tough, drugs and cutting are easy. So we're going to do the easy thing first. And it becomes a strategy, albeit maladaptive, that changes our brain chemistry back to, for a moment, letting us feel happy, feel joy, feel pleasure, feel anything other than this depressed state of being. So now you know your kid has depression. You know that depression might be the result of a trauma, an early childhood divorce, an assault that's taken place, the family experiencing or witnessing something. The child has depression and they self-harm. Don't tell me as a parent you're not traumatized. So understanding what trauma actually does, and the little t trauma and the big T trauma differences, really get us to understand everybody in the family is dealing with depression now, not just this child. And don't make the child the patient of the family. Really, really, really treat the family. The whole family's in recovery now. And that's strong language to use with the child, because then they don't feel like the black sheep, the identified patient. Hey, kiddo, we're all in recovery now. And that's the most powerful family work I've ever seen. So to go to one of your earlier questions to say, what can the family do? The first thing is that everybody in the family does something. Like that's the first thing we know is so extremely effective, is the family embraces recovery as a family, not as saying, well, my kid's in treatment. No, this family's in treatment. And start that language as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super powerful. But my question was, how about before, what happens, what is a preventative measure or step that the family can take even before it gets to that level of, okay, now we need to be in recovery?
Yeah. So what's amazing is that all four of the most successful and highest research preventative measures to keep children away from risky behavior, all four of them are free, except for one. One could contain a cost, but the other three are absolutely free. And that's amazing to me, is that we think preventative medicine is expensive. And not only, we call that the ounce of prevention versus the pound of cure. The right recovery is the pound of cure. It's expensive mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. Prevention is cheap and easy, but it takes you as a parent thinking outside of a norm, of a box, of a paradigm, of a status quo that we've come to think is acceptable. The number one, Eureka, the number one thing to keep your child from at-risk behavior is family dinners. That has been
Hmm.
proven by Stanford, by Harvard, by Oxford. It is the number one preventative measure. Turn off the damn TV, put the cell phones in the other room, no pads, no electronics, don't talk about work, don't talk about homework, talk as a family, connect as a family, be together an hour. Like I'm from a generation of the TV tray. I truly believe it's not electronics that killed family dinner, it's the TV tray that killed family dinner. When we made it acceptable to bring that into the family connection piece, media, turn it off and just have family dinner. And obviously you can improve on that one thing by saying, can you cook as a family? Can you clean as a family? Can you turn that 1 hour of eating into 2 hours of cooking and cleaning and eating together? Family dinners, number one. Number two, get to know your kids' friends' parents. Like it's my mom knew all of my friends' parents and they talked on the phone. And there was never an intervention in my neighborhood from my parents of bad behavior. It was neighborhood intervention. I remember breaking a bottle in the street one time in my neighborhood. And not only did I get hollered at and sent home by other parents, it was cleaned up by other parents. And my mom knew by the time I got home that I had broken a bottle in the street, and I had a round of apologies to make. This is the community raising the child. Number three, and that's something for your child to do between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock. This is the one that could be have a cost attached to it. Extracurricular activities, and it doesn't matter whether it's Dungeons and Dragons and chess club or choir or cheerleading or football or drama, or it does not matter what it is. It matters that from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we occupy the time with something other than more school work, more homework, that they have a community-oriented connective experience through physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional activity. 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, because, and this is an old saying, the idle hands do the devil's work. There's a lot of idle time and they don't want to be idle. That's why they come home, get online, and they find a way to connect. It's like we've built these fences around our homes and we're mad that our children found the hole in the fence. It's the internet. They're going to get online and they're going to connect somehow. So keep them connected in that physical, actual connective spot. The fourth thing, and it's a very important thing, is the real honest to goodness emotional intelligence and dependency information, not dare as a way to keep kids off drugs. That proved highly ineffective. We're talking about the real honest to God, what actually happens with brain development and teaching children how to be emotionally intelligent, actually using feeling words, actually experiencing and teaching emotional intelligence, how to have hard conversations, how to role play breaking up with someone, how to role play asking for a job, how to role play telling your parents that you're coming out of the closet. I truly believe that if they taught emotional intelligence to children, I would be out of a job. And folks, you want me out of a job. I want me out of a job. And there is no sign that that's going to happen. So family dinners, knowing your kids, friends, parents, something to do between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, and the real honest to God brain chemistry of addiction and dependency issues. And I'm not going to answer this, but I'm going to tell parents, here's a perfect example. This marijuana thing that's being legalized. Do you know what anandamide is? I'll give you a hint. It's a neuromodulator in your brain. Do you know how THC and anandamide work together and why marijuana, actually proven by science, is addictive and dangerous to a developing brain? If you don't know any of those words I just said, that's what I mean by the honest to God, real research and what happens in the brain when we utilize a maladaptive coping strategy.
Mm-hmm. So I think those 4 tips are excellent things that parents can do, and thank you for sharing those tips. But I was wondering, for this audience specifically, the tip number 2, knowing the parents of your friends, of your kids' friends, what would you recommend for parents whose kids don't really have friends? So a lot of times, often, children with special needs, they're often the only child with special needs, and a lot of times parents feel so isolated and not really having that community. So what happens when parents don't have that community, or their kids don't necessarily have friends?
I think that's a great question, and certainly the potential of that it exists. But let's have a conversation about real versus perceived isolation. In our parenting weekends, this is a regular occurrence. I will ask the people in the front row who have talked about the experiences that they're having with their kid. Has your kid ever stolen your car? And they'll nod their heads, and they'll have that look like, yeah, God, yeah, they did steal our car. And I'll say, raise your hand if your kid has stolen your car. And the people in the front will put their hands up looking at me, and I'll say, turn around and look behind you. And half the room has their hands up. And you just feel the energy change in the room. And I'll say, how many people have had your children who are so angry at you, they've called Child Protective Services on you and lied to them about what's going on in your house, and you end up getting investigated? And half the room, the hands go up and people start looking around. And certainly these are the families and children that we work with, that I coach, that we have in our facility. But nonetheless, the perceived isolation versus the real isolation is something that every parent needs to address for themselves and for their family. Everybody feels alone in what they're going through. And in fact, in the recovery world, we have a term for it. It's called terminally unique, that you believe that your situation is so unique that it's going to kill you. It's going to kill your family, and it's not. What you have to do is summon that extra energy, stir deep within your soul, and invoke your warrior side, and find someone else who's going through it. There's a group, there's an online support community, there's a club, there's a class, there's another family in your neighborhood that's going through this. Find them. And if you can't, start a group, start an online class, start an online support community, because nobody can do this without support. Nobody can go through having a special needs kid, or a kid in recovery, or a kid struggling with dependency or mental health issues. A family cannot struggle with depression alone. It will literally depress you even more. So you have to get out. And I know this is asking a lot, because you're already so stressed and maxed out and taxed to the hilt with what's going on in your family. I'm telling you, you got to go find a community. And it's true. You do. You got to get it. You got to summon the energy and courage, and you got to kill the secret. Eureka, it is such a common phrase in our industry. We say, kill the secret, kill the sickness. This thing that's killing your family, get out there and talk about it. Find someone else who's talking about it. Create dialogue and conversation, and you'll watch the sickness dissipate, because no one sickness is stronger than community support. It does take a village. It does take a community. Find it or create it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to invite everybody who's watching this series is there is a Facebook group specifically for that, to support parents with kids who have special needs. And it's in this email. It's in the bottom of every email for this series for 21 days. So please join that community. And I think it would be a really great place for parents to network. And also I'll be providing some like trainings and things like that in there. So if you're not part of a community already, online community or in-person community, please join this Facebook group. And I love the point that you talked about, like if you talk about that secret, because, you know, in mindfulness, it's a lot of times the things that we feel so ashamed or guilt about, it's like once you start talking about it, it loses its power. And you also find so many other people who are struggling with the same exact thing if you can just talk about it. And so just really encourage people to be vulnerable and talk about the things that you may feel shameful or guilty about, and watch it release its power over you and your family.
Not only do we see it in children start to release its power, but we actually see a phenomenon where we at Fire Mountain have called it the pain becomes the path, the wound becomes the way, the tears become the trail. This becomes this thing that has tormented us, becomes the thing that becomes our triumph. It takes work, it takes energy. This dragon that has been haunting your village, destroying your castle, taking your gold, killing your livestock, actually becomes an ally. I have a tattoo of a dragon on my arm, and it literally is a representation of my addiction. Every day I see this tattoo, and every day I'm reminded of the man I was and the man I am. And going to schools and telling children, I was sexually assaulted by my best friend. I was bullied. I grew up without a father. I started using drugs so that I wouldn't kill myself. You wouldn't believe the conversations I have afterwards with kids who come up to me and they say, me too, that happened to me. I feel that way right now. And you're suddenly this thing that hurts you. You're standing up in front of a crowd saying, this hurt me. And half the people are saying, I'm in pain. And now you can help. Now you know who to help. And now when you've said, me too, when you've said, I'm hurting too, someone's there to help you. But you have to kill the secret. A family is only as sick as its secrets.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, when you were sharing that, I literally got chills. You know, because it's so true. It's like we can use our pain for purpose. And that's like one of the things that Tony Robbins says a lot, is like, use your pain for purpose. Yeah. And I think that's so powerful. Well, Erin, thank you so much for being on this series with us. I would love for you to talk about your free gift that you're offering this audience.
I'm happy to, and I wanna express really clearly that there's not a tactic that I talked about on this summit. There's not a tactic that any expert talked about on this summit. And the free gifts that we are giving as experts, and my free gift, will do you no good. It will be worthless unless you take care of yourself first. Mm-hmm. As a parent, the most important thing about everything you're hearing is that the tools are only as good as a healthy carpenter, right? If you give me a Sawzall, I will cause more damage than good until I learn how to use a Sawzall, which means I got to pay attention to me. I cannot take care of my kid from a bad place. I cannot take care of my relationship from a bad place. If I'm not eating right, if I'm not sleeping right, if my nervous system is completely shot because I'm stressed out, I'm scared that my child is not going to make it. I'm scared that I'm doing everything wrong. I'm not sleeping. And because I'm not sleeping, my brain chemistry is all over the map. And so I'm craving foods that aren't necessarily helpful, but are solving temporary issues. And then at the end of the day, I'm so burnt out, 3 glasses of wine and binge watching 12 episodes of whatever new series is on TV. I'm still in not a good place. And so I go to bed and I'm on social media instead of letting my nervous system settle until I pass out at night. I wake up at 3 because my adrenals are shot. You cannot take care of your child. The tool I'm going to give you requires you to use your brain. And if your brain is not in good shape, the tool's not going to work. If I'm exhausted, how really good of a job am I going to do with a saw? How can I give my child a drink from my empty cup? So self-care is so important. And then we were just talking about finding a community or creating a community, but we're also talking about tending to your adult relationships before you tend to this thing going on with your child. You have to tend to your marriage because your marriage is being traumatized by what's going on. You're being traumatized, your marriage is being traumatized, your partner's spouse, lover is being traumatized. You got to tend to these relationships before you tend to your child because your child is in crisis. They're going to be manipulative and in utter chaos. Your brain has to be in the zone. So before you sit down with this great tool that me or any other expert is offering you, have you gone to a yoga class? Have you gone swimming? Have you taken a walk or a hike? Are you drinking enough water? Are you sleeping? Are you eating well? Because without those things, none of this is going to work. And so I really want to impress upon that. You take care of yourself first, your adult relationship second, your marriage, your support groups, and your children third, because that's how we do our best work for our children. So here endeth the lecture on self-care, but there is nothing without self-care. So once you've taken care of yourself, I want you to use my free gift. And my free gift is called a family behavior contract. This is a document that you and the other parenting partners are going to create, and then you're going to introduce it to the children to let them co-create parts of their side. And this is where you're going to reestablish your value system through your behaviors as an adult. You're going to show your willingness to support things like internet and cars and things like this with the proof and evidence of responsible behavior, which is you making requests of your children to do chores and have certain grade point averages. And this family behavior contract, every family member will be under. Yes, the 2-year-old, yes, the struggling child, and yes, the adults. Everybody's going to be under this contract, and everybody will come to the table with new and improved behaviors, rewards for making those behaviors happen on a regular basis, and consequences if they don't. This means, as parents, I cannot reiterate this enough, you will change your behavior. Not just with your kids, but also with your relationship, with your house, with your nighttime habits. You're going to put your phone away and agree to it and have consequences if you don't. You're going to be on social media less. You're going to sit down at the dinner table and have healthy meals with the family, working on connection before correction. And you're going to ask your kids, and you're going to establish your non-negotiables. There will be no drugs in this house. There will be no illicit behavior on the internet, or I won't be willing to provide it anymore. And this family behavior contract sets our family up to move from the yellow, the warning, or the red, the crisis, back to green, to say this is what it looks like when we're doing what's in this contract. We're a green family, and the rewards are this trip we're going to take instead of having to do therapy. And the rewards are that you get more freedoms because you're showing more responsibilities. This document is a workbook and allows you to create all these agreements and be able to figure out what it is you as a parent need to correct before you continue on parenting your child who might be in crisis. So to get that, you're going to look at the link that I believe you're providing them, but it's at firemountainprograms.com/coaching.
Yeah, thank you. I think that contract would be so powerful for families to have. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure.
It's so structured and yeah, really great. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Parents and audience, people who are watching this, please take advantage of Aaron's free gift. It is such powerful work that Aaron is doing, and just thank you so much for your time.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me as a guest.